Hello, I'm George from Ireland. Well, I wish to applaud the decision by Friedrich Merz and the German government to suspend arms sales to Israel, a decision announced on the 8th of August this year. And that's because of the ongoing Gaza genocide, although they actually use that word. But since the 7th of October, Israel began its barbaric attacks on Gaza, often deliberately targeting civilians. Amalek was the biblical story referenced by Netanyahu when he started this military attack, or maybe not even military attack, really just murderous attack on civilians. Amalek, where the Hebrews, according to the Holy Bible, killed every man, woman, and child of a certain tribe and so on. And Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and so on, members of the Netanyahu cabinet have been open about this, that they consider even children their enemies. There was a prominent rabbi who said, yes, let's starve even children to death. The Israelis, they've kidnapped thousands of Palestinians. There's a wide-scale use of torture against them, and so on. So there's been willful murder of tens of thousands of civilians. And yes, they've killed some Hamas fighters as well. And I realize that in warfare, civilians always get killed accidentally. I know that's bad. One must try one's best to avoid it, cannot always be avoided, but these are not accidents, it's not collateral damage. Is murdering civilians known to be civilians, or another situation? There was a Hamas militant whom the Israelis wanted to kill in a cafe, 20 civilians there, and they bombed it anyway. There was no urgent need to kill him at that moment. They wanted to kill him. They could wait till he walked away till he was on his own. But no, no, no. They knew they bombed it, knowing that they would murder 20 civilians as well. Yeah, I can accept in some situations you might kill one of your enemies and accept you'll kill one civilian, but not 20. They've done it again and again and again. Gaza has no agriculture. The Israelis won't allow any fishing there. All the food has to come from abroad. And okay, there's one crossing point from Egypt, and of course the Egyptians should do more. But cutting off food aid, cutting off medicines to starve them to death, it's absolutely sick. We know that they've deliberately targeted hospitals which are specifically protected under the Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, and so on. Israel signed and ratified all this, so it's absolutely horrific. It's real-time genocide, live streamed. It's sickening. The just abominable, appalling suffering that the Palestinians are going through that's visited upon them every day against a virtually defenseless people. And that doesn't mean that I hold any brief for Hamas. I think the 7th of October attacks were a good thing. No, I don't. Hamas deliberately murdered a few hundred civilians, but that pales in insignificance considering what Israel has done to them. Israel's a huge threat to Palestine, illegally occupied it for decades, and Hamas is almost no threat to Israel. Yeah, they killed a few hundred Israelis, but come on, Israel's armed to the teeth, is almost a military superpower, a nuclear power, for goodness sake. So Merz said, the German government initially backed Israel to the hilt, but the Israeli crimes have been so foul, have been on such a vast scale that has made Germany even change its policy. And the policy is obviously because of the Holocaust. Everybody knows about Shoah. No decent person would dispute this. That the Third Reich, from the Wannsee Conference till 1945 to May 1945, tried to wipe out the Jewish community in Germany and the other territories that the Third Reich controlled by gassing people, by shooting them, by starving them. Okay, starvation, overwork, lack of any medical care, nutrition. So the Gazans, sometimes they're shot dead, sometimes they're blown up. Not sure they've been gassed actually, although some Israeli politicians have openly said, let's have gas chambers. But also by starving them to death, by cutting them off from medical aid, things like that. Make sure there's no shelter, destroying or damaging almost every single building in Gaza, no shade in the punishingly harsh sunlight, to be no shelter from the wind and the rain in winter. It's just abominable what's been going on. They've inflicted so much just gratuitous suffering, what the Israelis have done. And not all Israelis are bad, of course not. There's some very gallant Israelis who speak up for human rights, even those who are willing to fight Hamas, to fight legally, to fight ethically, and say, oh, well, it's a terrorist base. Yeah, right. Every building in Gaza is a terrorist base. Oh, they're in tunnels. Okay, they have basements. So people go into bomb shelters. Surprise, surprise. And when Israel control the whole of Gaza till about 2000. They built some of these buildings with the tunnels underneath them. What's your better idea? Okay, why don't you do a deal and release some of the thousands of Palestinians you've taken hostage and release them? You'll just say they're terrorists, put them through totally unfair trials. Anyway, so Germany is always being morally blackmailed. All right, and it was right for Germany to pay compensation to Israel when they did it in the 1950s. Finally, able to establish diplomatic relations between the Federal Republic of Germany and the State of Israel in 1965. Now, the German Democratic Republic, that's East Germany, the communist one, the Soviet satellite, they didn't do that. So we bear no responsibility for the actions of Das Dritten Reich, and we're not paying a pfennig in compensation. But anyway, East Germany was absorbed into the Federal Republic. All right, so I'm glad that there's been atonement and so on, but Germany can't be morally blackmailed forever. Nobody alive today was guilty of the Holocaust, and the Holocaust was evil, absolutely evil, no question about that. That doesn't mean that Israel can murder tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. One genocide doesn't excuse another. There was genocide against Jews, that's evil. Genocide against Germans would also be evil. Well, all human beings, guilt and innocence are individual. They're not national. Okay, so and it's preposterous to say that Germans today that they would have they must expedite war crimes because of what was done by their great grandparents. And obviously, not every German, probably not even most Germans, were involved in that or even aware of it. I mean, a significant minority were. Okay, there were slogans about the destruction of the Jews and so on. But it's wrong to say that somehow this makes it morally right to murder tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians, and they're being killed on purpose. So it's really sickening. Lie after lie, unblushingly told, oh, they've got plenty of food, they're all overweight. When you see these people who are just walking skeletons, it's gruesomely reminiscent and distressingly reminiscent of what was going on in 1945 when people stumbled out of concentration camps. And okay, the Israelis would say, but we haven't killed everybody in Gaza. That's true. Killed, I mean, what percentage would it be now? 4%, something like that? Wounded quite a few more, taken quite a few more hostage. Why haven't they gone even further? That's partly because a segment of Israeli public opinion won't allow it. They don't want to push the international community too far. Israel's always wrecked relations with other countries. It's induced about 10 countries to recognize Palestine over the last couple of years. Obviously, there's a serious section of American public opinion which recognize that Palestinians are humans too, and crimes against humanity against them are as abominable as against Israelis or anybody else. So Germany should not be morally blackmailed. Saying, what about the Holocaust, is no reason to expedite a similar crime. The mass murder of civilians, killing them on purpose, knowing them to be civilians, the use of torture. There's a convention against torture, inhuman and degrading treatment from 1979, signed and ratified by Israel, by Germany, by many other countries, and we know that Israel is committing this on a very, very large scale. They've been very open about their genocidal intent. And no, you don't have to kill every single member of the group for it to be genocide. To deprive them of their homes, to drive them out of their homes, to illegally occupy the whole of it, and say that they've got to leave Gaza. No, Gaza belongs to them. The Palestinians have lost about 90% of Palestine over the last century. Look, they're going to lose even more of it, which is absolutely atrocious. So obviously, I'm opposed to terrorism, and this is state terror by the IDF. Just because they wear uniforms, no, that doesn't make it acceptable. Israel was to some extent founded by terrorists, the Stern Gang, Haganah, and so on, against the lawful authority there, the British mandatory authorities of the League of Nations put them in charge. The League of Nations being the precursor to the United Nations, with the United Nations, which created Israel by a vote in 1947. Israel only proclaimed independence the following year. And then Israel would ignore the will of the United Nations when it suits them. So there is so much injustice, there's so much cruelty in the world. It's very, very dispiriting. One of the biggest lies ever told is that good guys win, and good does not always win. Anyway, do what you can to speak up for human rights, and don't let people historically guilt trip you, right? No question that the Holocaust happened, but that doesn't mean that Germans should be accessories to another genocide in modern times. That is a non sequitur. So save Palestine, free Palestine. Thank you for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate PayPal, georgecallahan7@gmail.com. Goodbye.